Dan Fogelman, welcome to Q.
Thank you for having me.
As soon as I saw the film, I walked outside and I talked to our producer, Elaine, and kind of choking back emotions.
Sure.
And I looked at her and I said, question number one for him, what are you trying to do to us, man?
It's funny. The narrative about crying and making people cry, it's not something I ever set out to do or thought that would be really a thing.
Yeah.
I hoped it would affect people, you know what I mean, and move people in different ways. But yeah, it's been an interesting experience. My process when I'm making anything, a film or show, is I screen for people a lot.
Yeah.
I'll bring people into my edit bay or have a little theater and bring 10 friends in just to see how things are playing.
Are you behind one of those two-way?
No, but I'll sit with them and I've been doing this long enough where I can feel the audience a little bit. Yeah. Where I'm losing them, where I have them. And the reactions right away, it was clear that like the film was very loaded for people, and people were having like a big, in a positive way for the film, but like a big reaction emotionally to it. Yeah. And there's always this awkward moment where it would end, especially amongst men, young men who none of us want to ever be seen being emotional or crying. Yeah. And where it was just kind of like too tough. And I would just leave the lights off for 5 minutes and people just would sit in silence for a couple of minutes. And it was an interesting experience.
Yeah, even me, like I have to tell you, like I'm not someone who cries at films. I'm not someone, I'm kind of stoic when I watch them. But maybe it's I think it also like brings you to think of any kind of loss you've had in your life. You're losing a parent, losing all those things. Those things bubble up to the surface when you watch.
Well, that's the interesting part is people say like, oh, why are you interested in this kind of stuff? And I'm like, well, isn't that what our lives are full of? Our lives are full of weddings and births and deaths and losses of parents and great love for our children and parents and family. I'm like, what else is there to really write about?
However, I do think there's lots of obviously there's a lot of technique there, but I think there's technique there in that way too, because I think that part of the reason people have that really emotional reaction to your stories is because these are generally ordinary people and they seem like ordinary people, and trying to deal with just generally the ups and downs, the realities of life. I'm less curious about what you do to make that seem authentic and make that seem real, but I'm wondering, are the things you don't do, are the things you avoid?
It's a really good question. I mean, I think when you tread in like the space that I like to work in, you have to have a meter, right? Where like
what space is that? That's the
dramedy. Like there's a little bit of comedy, but then you can go really heavy, but then you can go really sweet. Like
sure.
Is that a good word? Dramedy, maybe. And but you have to have a good monitor of like, if you're going to have something that really makes you feel, it can be really good to have humor after and before it or within it. Otherwise, it gets too full, too much, too early. It's like going on a ride, a roller coaster, and you want to keep the ride moving so that sometimes it's got that tick, 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 where it's kind of ticking up, and then a big drop, and then it might be fast for a part or go upside down. And I think it's a little bit of just kind of keeping your foot on and off the pedal to kind of modulate.
So there are times where you go maybe a little too much.
A little bit. There's a scene in the film where Mandy, it's one of my favorite scenes in the film, where Mandy Patinkin has a scene with a little girl. And Mandy did 3 different types of performances, and all of them were beautiful. But one of them, and not the one I used, was he got really, really emotional during the scene with the little girl. And it's like tour de force acting, you know what I mean? And
he was crying, he was
crying, but there's not a false note in the performance. But that didn't feel right for that point in the movie. After, in that space in the movie, we'd just been through a lot in the film. And actually I took an emotional take from him, but a strong take where he's firmly talking to his daughter with emotion in his voice. Right. And that's a small thing that you do 4,000 times within a movie to try and use your meter to figure out like where to push the pedal and not too much.
Where's your line? Where's your line between sentimentality and honest emotion?
It's just an instinct I have. My line is further along than like a cynical critic, you know what I mean? It's not as far as like some people who like really can dive into the kind of schmaltzy stuff. I think this film, it would do some of the things that happen in the film. Like what was interesting and challenging in the film is very dark. Like the film is not an easy film, and so I think some of the sentiment is earned because the characters and you as an audience go through some really heavy-duty stuff. This is not like rich people problems. Like there is some real darkness at the core of the film. For me, I was trying to get at, life is difficult, and especially difficult right now. The human experience is difficult and complicated and often very dark. I choose to kind of push past that and see the beauty that comes from just watching one of my buddies with his kid, or going to a wedding or going, as I recently did, to a close friend's funeral who died early and young, and it was awful and it was sad, but there was also laughter and love and beauty in watching his family. And I choose to see not just the ugly and the sad, but the other side of it as well, because I think we're surrounded by that. And so,
I mean, I love the way you depict the futility, a bad word to use.
Yeah, no.
But I've read your piece for Deadline about your mother.
Yeah.
You know, and I think one of the reasons that this really affected me so much is that I lost my dad when I was really young, and when I read your piece about Deadline, and when you talked about this film and about how it was dedicated to your wife and dedicated to your mom, and I was just really taken by the part where you said, I knew she was going to get better. I knew everything was going to work out because, and I can tell that things generally work out.
Yeah.
And then when they don't, it's like it's real life smacking you in the face.
My friend at work, who I do my television show with, calls it life at full volume. And like life at full volume, you know, we all go about our day, and our days are often pretty mundane, no matter what place we're living in, no matter where in the world we're living in. And then you have one of those moments or one of those days, and you're like, oh wow, and your entire life can turn on its axis like that.
Yeah.
And that's what's so interesting to me about the human experience is you are one swerve of a car in oncoming traffic to your entire existence being shifted. It doesn't have to be a car accident that involves you.
Yeah.
And that's how fleeting this all is. And we're worried about, you know, nonsense most of the time. But we all experience it. It's not melodrama. One of the things I figured out in my show, am I talking too much?
Not at all.
One of the things I figured out in my show was I always wondered when we were doing our television show, how much was too much when it turned into soap opera and melodrama.
Well, that was kind of what I was asking before. What's the line? Yeah.
The line for me, what was interesting sitting in my show, I sat on our first week of making the show, this was 3 years ago, but it informs this film, with a group of 10 writers who I'd hired to be in the show, and we shared our life experiences, what had happened to us in our lives, the good, the bad, the ugly. And it was 10 really normal people in the world. These weren't celebrities, I'd hired young women as
Just
writers.
sitting in the
regular
This Is Us,
people
This Is
sitting
Us writers
sitting in the
room.
writer's room.
Right.
And our stories are dramatic. Even the most mundane life, the most ordinary life, if you distill it to how your parents met together, the confluence of events that brought your parents together to form you, even if you know, and then the things that brought us together with not just our significant others, but led us to career paths and love and loss and tragedy. Our lives, when you break them down to the key moments, the most ordinary life is really spectacular and cinematic. And so that's why, like, I enjoy focusing on people with ordinary lives, not superheroes or not famous people. I think it's really interesting to look at the normal human experience and say, like, wow, your life, when you really look at it, was very much like a movie. And you would just go, oh, I'm just a normal guy, I'm living a regular life.
But do you feel like you write sort of an elevated version of the way that humans speak?
Maybe.
I think you might favor the monologue.
Yeah, I do.
Especially with Oscar Isaac's character in this film. There's some of the most beautiful moments are him kind of monologizing, is that the term? To Olivia Wilde in the film. What is it about the monologue as a form that you like so much?
I think what I try and do with the films is, like, I try and capture something that feels relatable and identifiable to people, but we all don't necessarily speak in monologues. We don't all have that ability, and we don't have somebody writing for us.
Yeah.
So we're also making films, and I think, like, so much of our art these days is everybody wants everything to be so real, right? It's like everybody wants their films to feel like a documentary, right? And I think movies can still be movies, and you don't have to just reserve the fantastical for superhero movies, or, you know what I mean, or Marvel movies.
Like, it's funny how that sounds radical to me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's funny that you're right.
Yeah.
It's almost a radical decision to write a dramatic, heightened, Sorkin-y monologue in a, you know?
Well, it's entertainment. I'm asking people to come into a movie theater and pay to see. Listen, like, most people, I think a lot of people will identify with the type of love and relationship Oscar Isaac and Olivia Wilde's character have. Mm-hmm. That being said, most people don't look like Oscar Isaac and Olivia Wilde.
They can't all be us.
Yeah, and not everybody speaks exactly like them, but there's something in the essence of what they're doing in this film that reminds people of their best moments and some of their worst moments with their spouses. And so I think you can heighten things because you're asking to sweep people away into a film, and I think that's okay. My tool is I don't have people jumping off things and wearing capes and flying and having guns, so, like, I like to do stuff with a lot of words.
Right. Yet, Dan, yet. I'm waiting
Yeah,
for the,
the superhero film.
the Aquaman.
I don't think I'd be very good. It'd just be a lot of people in costumes giving monologues. Yeah, yeah.
Hey kid, you want to see Aquaman cry?
A weeping Aquaman who doesn't stop talking.
I feel like in this film, in life itself, unlike This Is Us,
Yeah.
I really felt like, I'm trying not to give away too much,
Yeah.
but I feel like I could sense you speaking directly to the viewer.
Yeah.
Was that intentional?
I think so. I'm not good enough to have anything be intentional. I really am not. I don't sit down with a plan. I didn't sit down to write this film for my mother and wife. I didn't have a plan.
But there's a lot of voiceover narration in this film.
There is. It's my voice. I mean, I think the movie is the closest this film is the closest I've come to kind of putting myself on a television screen. I'm sorry, on a film screen. Only in that, like, it's got my view of the world in it and pretty much spoken out loud. And, you know, I think if you don't like the film, you probably like wouldn't like me. You know what I mean? As a person, like we probably wouldn't be friends, which is okay. But like, because it's as much as myself tonally as I can put on a screen.
You've talked a couple of times now about the heightened dialogue in your film.
Yeah.
Is that things can still be entertainment without people needing necessarily to jump off skyscrapers. You know, and it's a thread I've found in just researching your work and reading past interviews that I don't know whether I should use this word or not, but you know, This Is Us, a proudly populist television show. Life itself, a proudly populist a film. Do you see them the same way? This is as a populist film.
I do. I think the film's. I think our show was challenging for a couple of reasons because of the medium it was living on, which was American network television. You were asking the audience to really stretch with the kind of construct of jumping around in time. I think this is a little bit challenging in a different way in that it's a lot darker and it's a lot darker, and so you're asking the audience to go to a certain place with it. But yeah, I think high quality populist stuff is lacking right now. I think we tend to throw red meat to the wide audience. Yeah. And what this film and screening this film has shown me is if you don't underestimate your audience and you provide them something they can access emotionally, like they'll go with you on the ride. And so, you know, we took our film early, you know, half the film is in Spanish. Halfway through the film, it changes to another language and all the characters shift. For a movie that's coming out in America on, you know, 2,500, 3,000 screens as a wide release, that's a daunting proposition. And we took it to the middle of the country to see how it would play, and it played big, like it was playing on the coast of our country. And it was a reminder, like, if you don't talk down to your audience, and you say to them, like, I'm going to kind of take you on a ride. It's going to be challenging. It's going to be emotionally challenging, and it's going to be structurally challenging. It's going to ask you to come to a movie thinking you're watching one thing and learn you're watching something else. They will go with it if you execute it properly. So that was a really exciting lesson in populism for me on this film.
And it's almost a brave, or at least again, I use that word, radical thing to do in a time which is marked by cynicism.
Yeah.
Where, I mean, I don't know if you're on Twitter very often, but you know, generally anything that's a beautiful moment at the Academy Awards, or anything that's a beautiful moment on a stage or at a Super Bowl, or even like Hamilton, which was supposed to be this beautiful you know, celebration and triumph, can be seen cynically. It's hard to create earnest things in a cynical vacuum right now.
It is. I mean, the internet is brutal. I mean, it's just a brutal place for anybody.
Quote you there, I think.
Yeah, but for anybody who's creating anything, it's brutal. And our television shows, like, you know, it's something that, like, in the States, it's like it's such a big hit, and it's getting nominated for all awards. Like, you would think it would check every box of what you're trying to, like, accomplish as, like, a narcissistic, like, writer and people who work on the show. But, you know, there's vitriolic commentary constantly if you go online, you know, that can take your legs out, because it's not just from, like, a random kid in his mother's basement. It's also, like, sometimes from heavy-duty critics and, you know, and people who make lists, and that's for a show that has kind of won, you know what I mean, the battle. And so, yeah, it's the world, it's much easier to be dark and cynical than it is to be optimistic and earnest. And especially nowadays. I just don't understand. I'm on Twitter once a week with my one tweet. I can't fathom ever taking the time to write something mean about somebody's work. I can't imagine a universe where I would want to go online. I'm not even talking as a critic, I'm talking as a human being. Just why would you want to watch something and take the time to write down the words like, I hated this thing, it sucked? It's foreign to me. I don't understand. What if that person who worked on it read it? Like, I don't understand how more people aren't wired that way.
I guess it's under the guise of like, people can't watch everything, so I need to be the,
Maybe that's true.
you know, I need to be the judge for others so they know what's worth watching.
Maybe that's true. As a human being, I find it very difficult to do. Amongst friends, if people say, hey, what do you think of that movie? I go, I don't know if I'd waste your money spending the $10 and the 4 hours and the babysitter. I don't think you're going to like it very much.
Yeah.
But to actually, it's always like kind of confounded me that that's like where we're living right now. And it's not actually to hit the people who do it. It's just foreign to me. I would have a very difficult time doing it. I have a difficult time writing negative things about people whose politics I violently disagree with. Maybe I'm broken.
Dan, it's been a pleasure talking to you.